It is the 16th of June 1858. A tall man is speaking from the stage of the Republican Party convention in Springfield, Illinois, where he has just accepted the nomination to be the state senator. One of the most famous speeches of the American history is about to begin. Its most famous line is, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." That man was Abraham Lincoln. Less than 3 years later, the same man will be at the helm of one of the sides in the bloodiest conflict ever to take place in the North American continent. It is a well-known history, but are we sure that we know why it all began? I am the Crowd. Welcome to Millennium 7. Slave labor started very early in American history. European colonies in the Caribbean began making use of slave workforce in the 16th century. The first African slaves in the North American colonies arrived around 1670 in the then newly founded province of Carolina. About 2 centuries later, in 1860, there were 4 million slaves in the United States, and their worth was close to $3 billion. Now, everyone has heard the story before. The freedom-loving North couldn't tolerate that 4 million human beings were deprived of freedom and fought the evil South to end this institution. This is obviously an oversimplified version that is taught to children. Actually, slavery was just a factor among others. Other relevant elements were differences in the economic and social structure of the two sides, and the different views on the balance of powers between the states and the federal government. But why these differences led to a bloody and horrifying war? Many countries experience similar economic differences inside their borders but do not split or fight a civil war. France, for example, has an industrial north and a more agricultural south, but there is no trace of any secession movement. In Italy, the debate between central and local power has been going on for 3 decades now, but there is no violence in sight. So what was different in the United States of the first half of the 19th century? Well, wars are fought for many reasons, but the most common is because one side wants something that the other side possesses, and it is too important to let it go. Was this the case for the American Civil War? Well, let's see. In the 18th and 19th century, cotton was a commodity in high demand. The climate and the soil of the South are conducive to its growth, and it soon became a lucrative business. Having been established in the colonial era, the business developed according to the model already in use in other British colonies. Rich investors and rich families acquired large plantations, where slave labor provided most of the workforce. While a non-negligible fraction of the cotton output was processed in the North, the bulk of production was exported, mostly to Great Britain. It was an incredibly profitable trade and by far the most important export from the United States. It varied in time, but overall, cotton was around 60% of the exported value. It is also crucial to notice that in an era when currencies were still backed by gold, the exchange rate between the British pound and the US dollar did not fluctuate to accommodate the balance of payments. From the War of 1812 to the beginning of the Civil War in 1860, it remained just below $5 per pound. We will come back to this later. With this commerce, the southern elites accumulated an ever-growing quantity of wealth. In the last 15 years before the war, the export grew steadily at an unprecedented rate. Even the low tiers of society, those who didn't own slaves, recognized how the cotton business was the engine of the southern economy. Social inequality was extremely high, but everybody had a stake in King Cotton. At the eve of the war, the southern ruling class had never been so rich. The northern colonies had a different story. While the climate still allowed agriculture, the landscape and the presence of natural resources were conducive to the development of industries. The new industries market was mostly internal, because immigration from Europe expanded the northern population and consequently expanded the demand that the industries could tap into. The expanding business produced a more even distribution of wealth than in the South. A working class and a middle class began to emerge. The new classes had money to spend. Their expenditures drove demand up, leading to further industrial development. Together with the territorial expansion, this phenomenon created an upward development spiral that set the North to a completely different economic and social path from the South. But what did the North see when it looked south? The new northern industrialists saw in the South a rich potential market that they did not have full access to. With the riches of the South concentrated in relatively few hands, there was almost no middle class to serve with the brand new goods that invaded the consumer market during the first half of the century. The Southern elite, like most elites in history, had a special predilection for foreign products, stimulating imports. Their vast reserves of foreign currency acquired through export could only increase their propensity to import foreign and exotic goods. Now, imports were the only thing that the new bold industrial elite in the North was scared of. During the first half of the century, the United States maintained tariffs on imports. This favored northern industries, protecting the internal market from being flooded by foreign products, mainly British. The extent of these tariffs had always been a battleground at federal level between northern and southern representatives. In 1832, an early outbreak of the Civil War was narrowly avoided when South Carolina passed an act that declared illegal the tariff legislation of 1828 in its territory. The law was withdrawn only under the menace of using military force by the federal government. Compromises had been found since, but the increase of northern population, much faster than in the South thanks to the immigration, progressively reduced the overall influence of the southern state in the Congress. The economic interests of the North and South were diverging, and the chasm was widening fast. The South feared that their interests were going to be increasingly underrepresented in the government of the United States. The North believed that, somehow, the South was going to be pushed to adapt and become a new and rich market. But the contrast, though, was going to become even harsher. In 1854, in the wake of the progressive disappearance of the Whig Party and with the contribution of fringes of the Democratic Party, the new Republican Party was founded. Its ideological base openly advocated the modernization of the country, development of banking, financial institutions, railroads, and the distribution of new lands to small-medium farmers. The motto of the new party in those years was "Free soil, free labor, free man." It is easy to see how the very ideology of the party was in open contrast with the South's economic interest. No wonder it had almost no support in the South. So, it is no surprise that when the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, was elected in November 1860, the South felt that there was no remaining alternative. One by one, the states seceded from the Union. In the same way, the North saw a potentially lucrative market move beyond reach, and the source of most of the export vanish in few weeks. At that point, the North decided that the use of force was necessary to preserve the Union. The South actually made everything easier for the North, kicking off the hostilities the 12th of April 1861 by attacking Fort Sumter. Was there a way to avoid the war? Was there a possible path to reconcile North and South interests? Well, maybe. If an evolved banking and financial system had been in place, this might have favored the allocation of the resources so to smooth the economic asymmetry. If the southern elite could have invested their riches in the northern industries, both sides would have benefited from the accumulated wealth, and both would have had a stake in each other's economic system. At the time, however, the banking system was still in its infancy. Totally unregulated, with no central institutions, it was highly unstable. The whole century will be characterized by recurring banking crises that will really come to an end only after the 1929 crash and the subsequent legislation. Also, if the dollar could have appreciated against the British pound, as it should have done following the spectacular export growth that took place in the last 15 years of peace, it would have been a stabilizing factor. A high dollar would have made all the US export more expensive, thus slowing the cotton export growth. The South might have had to diversify its economy, opening its market to the northern industrialists. Unfortunately, the underlying gold convertibility severely limited the currency exchange oscillations. The dollar started to shift from the £5 level only after the beginning of the war, and it weakened against the British pound. That is, it moved in the opposite direction. Actually, from a purely economic point of view, it would have made sense that the North and the South were two separate states with separate currencies and different fiscal policies. However, this could not have been, as Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So, thanks for watching and good night. I can almost hear you. Wait, hang on. This can't be everything. What about slavery? Oh yes, slavery. Indeed, slavery was a hotly debated topic in the political arena in the years preceding the war. There is no doubt that the abolitionist side had among its ranks men and women who were sincerely convinced that the institution was an inhumane abomination. There is equally no doubt that their influence on the public opinion heavily contributed to the hostility toward the South, but symmetrically in the South, a corresponding movement to preserve the Southern way of life contributed to the hostility toward the North. I am not going to judge the past through the lens of modern ethics, but just analyze the subject from a political and economical point of view. From the political point of view, the northern working class saw slavery as a source of cheap labor, potentially competing with them for the less skilled jobs. Since working class consensus was important for the Republican and the Democratic Party as well, both parties adopted an abolitionist line. However, officially, politics has always been cautious towards slavery, even during the war, hoping that a soft line would have helped at some point to reach a negotiated solution. From the economic point of view, slavery made entirely sense given the South economic structure. Slave labor was indeed one of the reasons that helped maintain a competitive cotton price that brought the US to dominate the world cotton market in the years before the war. So, no surprise the South fought so hard to preserve it. With the war quickly spiraling out of control, slavery became a subject very well suited to be the centerpiece of the war narrative. Surely multitudes of men and women on both sides believe in righteousness of their cause in respect to slavery. And it is a bitter irony that the masses were not aware of the other underlying and more mundane reasons that caused their tribulations. Thanks again for watching. Good night.